One of the things that has been glaringly obvious in this pandemic is that, gee, we've got a lot of governing leaders in this country, day after day, press conference after press conference, often at the same time. The lower rung, the local councils, followed by the state leaders, your Andrews and Berejiklian, Annastacia Palaszczuk types, and the top of the top, the Prime Minister, the Health Minister, and sometimes it's all at the same time. For a country of just 25 million, we sure have a lot of layers and, of course, despite a national cabinet, they all tend to do their own thing, including on borders. So do we really need them after all? Is that one of the lessons out of this pandemic? Let's bring in the panel now. Sky News host of Across Australia, Peter Gleeson from Brisbane, and 2GB4BC radio broadcaster Luke Grant is in the Hunter Valley. Luke, Pete, good to have you on.
Smithy, good to see you, mate. Peter?
Good to see you, Smithy.
Yeah, good to have you here. Oh, look, Luke, I'll start with you. Do you think we should scrap state governments? Have we got one layer too many?
We have. So you consider yourself, you've probably got 3 councillors, then you've got a state member, then you've got a federal member, then you've got ministers and leaders that hang off all of them, and there's got to be duplication in health departments federally and health departments at the state level as well. But what we're doing is we're asking, and this was argued by Hawke back in the 70s, and lots of other politicians subsequently, including Lindsay Tanner, Tony Abbott, and Barnaby Joyce, but never a state politician, because you'll be asking one level of the political class to vote themselves out of a job. And you've got to convince their bureaucrats that that's the way to go as well. I'll take up on your point about national cabinet. You know, it's nice that they get together and they talk about fighting the pandemic. Surely they can do other things. They talk about in some of those federal departments, Chris, about getting an efficiency dividend. Well, why don't they get themselves in a room and have a serious conversation about who does what twice, double handling, all that fat, and have a crack at giving us mug taxpayers an efficiency dividend? Why don't they do that?
I like the sound of that, almost like a running audit. I like the sound of that. Now, Peter Gleeson, you wrote about this only a few days back. How would it work, seriously? Now, I know what Luke's saying. They've got to sack themselves. That's never going to happen. Is there any other way around this?
Exactly. Well, there's probably a referendum. You'd have to go to a referendum, which, of course, the federal government would have to impose. But I did write about this at the weekend, and your timing's exquisite, Chris. I was besieged with emails from people who are very, very keen on this, suggesting that it's overly bureaucratic. There's 1,000 state MPs floating around, state and territory MPs floating around in this country. So you can imagine the type of money you'd save there, but also the bureaucracy. I mean, have a look at how much we actually spend on state and territory bureaucracies. It's extraordinary. And, of course, you have the situation right now where, I mean, the feds provide the states with health funding, and, of course, they then sort of administer that. They supply them with education funding and they administer that. The duplication and the bureaucracy and duplication in bureaucracy in this country is extraordinary. And I can tell you now, Chris, from the amount of response that I got last Sunday on that column that I wrote, there is a very strong groundswell in this country to abolish the states. It won't happen unless you do it in 2050, because the current mob there are on too good a wicket.
Yeah, there's always that. They love their cardigans. Now, the states keep their borders closed for longer than needed. That's all fine, but by the sound of Simon Birmingham today, they could feel the economic cost. Federal Tourism Minister says if a state or territory border were to remain closed to a jurisdiction that had successfully suppressed the spread of COVID-19, which they've all already done, then that state or territory government will need to be accountable to their tourism industry and will ultimately need to provide additional support. Luke, it's about time the government forced the states to link the costs that have been accrued by the feds to their recalcitrance on keeping borders closed.
Smithy, 100% correct. Look at Queensland, for example. Peter's probably more familiar than me with that. He lives there. But so Annastacia Palaszczuk shuts the borders to Canberrans. No live cases, no new infections. But if you're in Canberra, you can't go to Queensland. She shut the borders because there's an election in October. And what she doesn't want is 3 Brisbaneites to go to Melbourne to allegedly knock off some handbags and bring the virus back with them.
That was the reason she did that. I still can't work that out.
That she did it because there's an election.
Milking it.
And oh, mate, it's absolutely appalling. Absolutely appalling. No, mate, they've got to pick up the bill. If they're going to go away from the federal advice, away from the health experts, then they've got to pay the bill.
Okay.
And in the case of tourism...
Chris, they're milking it. They're milking it, mate.
Yeah, of course they are. They're using what they've got this year, which is the Northern Territory election in 9 days' time, the Queensland election coming up, etc. Now, I want to move on. If you fail more than half your first-year subjects at university, you'll now lose fee funding. This is the message from the government to university students as part of its overhaul of higher education fees. Peter, is that fair?
Yeah, I think it is. You're there to learn. You're there to make sure that you come out a more educated person when you leave the tertiary education system. And I think if you go along there and bludge, and let's face it, they're only asking you to pass 50%. I mean, you know, if you're fair income about getting on in this world, this big, wide, angry world, you're going to have to come out of there with 70 or 80% to survive. And if you can't pass 4 out of 8 subjects, no, you don't deserve help. You don't deserve
I think you've nailed the reason why this is passable, because it is 50%. They're not after honours. I think that is why this passes the pub test. Look, it will discourage a lot of high school leavers from being attracted to university, though, won't it, or will it?
I don't think so. I mean, if you're fair income, you'll have a go, won't you? I noticed on social media today the bullies are saying, oh, look at the Morrison government trying to shut down academics. So, you know, we get these zombies that vote for them at elections. It's not about that. And you know what? If you're crook or there are other extenuating circumstances, they'll take them into account. This is to pick out people who'll enrol in 100 courses, slight exaggeration, and then not worry about the HECS debt, which we all have to worry about.
Yeah, exactly. Only someone like you could handle 100 courses. Weekend and evening penalty rates could be a thing of the past if the Franchise Council of Australia gets its way. They're calling today for a series of workplace policy changes to be considered by the government's review of industrial relations. Gleeson, as society has grown and changed, we're moving further away from this because, you know, there are so many people whose Saturday and Sunday is the old Wednesday and Thursday or Thursday and Friday. And once we open borders again, and I mean international borders, this is where it takes into account the number of people who need to get access to hospitality over the weekend.
But I'm going to stick up for those who work on weekends and at night. And, of course, Chris, you and I both do the same. But, I mean, at the end of the day, they're called penalty rates for a reason. And that is because you are being penalised for working either at the weekend or at nights. And so you're entitled a little bit more. I think this will wither on the vine. I don't think this will get too far. And I think that people who do work crazy hours deserve extra pay. OK,
I disagree, but let's leave it there because I want to get to the most important topic of the day, and I've left it to now. Some breweries have turned to creating hand sanitiser throughout the pandemic, but not VB, the beer company. Instead, they've developed a fragrance.
I can feel it calling me, but where? Yeah, my hard-earned thirst needs a big cold. The feel, the smell. Matter of fact, I've got it now. Thirst. A scent by VB.
Look, the bottle even looks like a little can of beer. Have you got your pre-order in?
You know what? Sold out. I went to the website, nothing there. I'm hoping Vegan Cheese came out with some yellow moisturiser stuff. What would Reese Plumbing come out with, Chris? I want to know.
I've used this before, boys. I've used this fragrance before. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Twain's 1984.
I can
Plenty
hear
of beer all over me. Plenty of VB. Never worked.
I can hear the slogan now. VB for a hard-earned stench. You know?
That's it.
That'd be a great slogan. Peter Gleeson, Luke Grant, great to have you on.